The quiet Sunday morning in Pinewood Gardens, a seemingly harmonious middle-class neighborhood, was shattered for Wade Carver, a retired SWAT officer, not by gunfire, but by the click-clack of determined heels on his driveway. Leslie Donahue, the HOA president, a woman whose crisp gray polo shirt with HOA boldly embroidered across the chest was her armor and her weapon, had arrived. She wasn't there for a neighborly chat about lawn maintenance. Her eyes, cold and calculating, were cataloging Wade's collection of legally owned hunting rifles as he meticulously cleaned them in his open garage. This was Wade's 18 years of SWAT training screamed reconnaissance. "Good morning, Mr. Carver," Leslie began, her voice dripping with a manufactured authority that immediately set off alarm bells in Wade's professionally honed mind. "I'm Leslie Donahue, your HOA president. I need to discuss some community safety concerns." She gestured vaguely towards his rifles, her real target. "Several neighbors have expressed concerns about weapons being stored in residential areas," she continued, consulting a clipboard with theatrical precision. "Especially with so many children. I'm sure you understand. We need to prioritize community safety." The manipulation was subtle but clear. Weapons, not legally owned firearms. Stored, not responsibly secured. Individual preferences, not constitutional rights. Her gray polo, still stiff from the package, and the custom embroidery, looked more like a costume than an official uniform. She positioned herself to block his garage entrance, her eyes inventorying, not engaging. This wasn't about safety. It was about control, evaluation, and Wade suspected something far more sinister. Wade, whose faded SWAT shirt and service tattoo spoke of authority earned through sacrifice, not purchased online, calmly questioned her. "What kind of safety concerns?" Leslie, clearly expecting deference, not inquiry, fumbled slightly before launching into a pre-rehearsed spiel about community standards. She failed to produce any documentation proving her authority or citing specific laws. This, Wade knew, was classic imposter behavior. As Leslie stalked away, her self-consciousness about her uniform apparent, Wade felt the familiar cold calm of a brewing confrontation. She had just targeted someone with the skills to recognize criminal intent and the network to investigate it. Her gray polo was about to become Exhibit F. By Monday, Leslie's gray polo had multiplied. 3 more individuals, clad in identical HOA enforcement shirts, patrolled Pinewood Gardens like an occupying force. The visual impact was calculated. A single polo might be questioned, but 4 suggested legitimate organization. They conducted community safety patrols, stopping residents, their clipboards and cheap badges lending an air of officialdom that most unquestioningly accepted. Leslie was expertly exploiting the human tendency to respect a uniform. Their first victim was Bill Henderson, a retired mechanic, who, within an hour of Leslie's team inspecting his garage, was voluntarily surrendering his lifetime collection of power tools, convinced they posed a safety risk to neighborhood children. Wade watched, a chilling rage building, as Bill loaded his livelihood into Leslie's van under the authoritative supervision of her costumed cronies. This wasn't just overreach. It was organized theft disguised as community service. Wade's SWAT instinct screamed tactical positioning. Leslie was systematically isolating potential threats, starting with those less likely to resist, building momentum for larger operations. His fears were confirmed by a grim call from Tommy, an old police contact. "Wade, you've got a classic authority impersonation scam. Leslie Donahue, she's a professional con artist, got connections to a network specializing in using fake authority to enable theft." Leslie's team wasn't just wearing matching shirts. They were following a tested criminal playbook. The gray polos were chosen for their official yet vague look, the HOA enforcement, branding deliberately ambiguous. They targeted communities like Pinewood Gardens, close-knit enough for local trust, but not savvy enough to demand independent verification. They weaponized community concern, making resistance seem antisocial. Wade realized his isolation was tactical. By targeting him early and publicly with the initial weapons concern, Leslie had sent a chilling message. Resistance would be met with community pressure and official-looking consequences. The gray polo was camouflage for a predator, but Leslie had miscalculated. Wade's SWAT shirt represented training, connections, and an unwavering commitment to justice that her $30 costume couldn't intimidate. The community meeting that Sunday was Leslie's carefully choreographed stage. The community center, transformed into a pseudo-courtroom, buzzed with tension. Leslie and her uniformed team sat at the head table, exuding an aura of governmental authority. We're here today to address serious safety concerns that threaten our children and our community values, Leslie began, her voice heavy with feigned solemnity. Her son, Richard, now sporting his own gray polo embroidered with HOA legal consultant, flanked her like a thuggish bodyguard, spewing circular logic about the HOA's obligation to ensure dangerous materials are properly regulated. Wade stood, his SWAT shirt a stark contrast to their costumes, his service tattoo a visible reminder of earned authority. "Ma'am," he addressed Leslie, his voice calm but firm, "I've spent 18 years in law enforcement. What you're proposing isn't legal, isn't necessary, and isn't going to make anyone safer." The room fell silent. Residents like Dr. Harrison, a man of science, and Barbara Whitaker, a discerning retired teacher, shifted uncomfortably, caught between social conditioning and dawning skepticism. Leslie, however, launched into a masterful manipulation, painting Wade's legitimate questions as military arrogance, positioning herself as the protector of concerned families. The subsequent vote, though closer than Leslie expected, 28 for her temporary weapons restriction, 22 against, 5 abstaining, gave her the mandate she craved. "Mr. Carver," she announced triumphantly, "you have 72 hours to comply or face the consequences." The real confrontation happened in the parking lot. Richard, flanked by 2 other enforcement team members now sporting tactical gear over their gray polos, cornered Wade. "My mother tried to handle this diplomatically," Richard sneered, violating Wade's personal space. "We have legal authority, cooperate voluntarily, or we can make cooperation involuntary." Wade looked at Richard's costume, then at his own SWAT shirt. "Son," he said quietly, "I've dealt with real authority my entire adult life. You and your mother are wearing costumes and making threats. That means you're not authorities. You're criminals." Leslie's team escalated, their tactical gear enhancing their intimidation factor. Pinewood Gardens was under occupation. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow, was publicly humiliated with a bogus violation for her dog's ID tags. Wade's SWAT training recognized this as organized psychological warfare. His surveillance cameras, strategically placed, began to capture Leslie's team conducting daily patrols with military precision. Richard, the tactical coordinator, meticulously mapped neighborhood layouts, noting security systems and valuables. Their gray polos were the key to accessing private property, asking intrusive questions, and cataloging everything from jewelry and electronics to art and collectibles, reconnaissance for theft. The evening Wade's SWAT training fully kicked in. He felt a cold, satisfying clarity. Leslie's team was weaponizing the psychology of authority, but they'd targeted someone with the skills and network to dismantle their entire operation. Every interaction, every document was recorded, preserved, and shared with Tommy's security company and legitimate law enforcement agencies, who were already building a case. Leslie and Richard, so confident in their gray polo power, were about to discover that 18 years of SWAT experience had taught Wade how to identify, track, and neutralize threats. "Ma'am." The sheriff addressed Leslie, who was still clutching the shotgun, bewildered that her uniform hadn't granted her immunity. "You need to put that weapon down immediately. You're under arrest for multiple felonies." Leslie's final delusional protest. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. We're conducting a lawful enforcement action under HOA authority," only highlighted how divorced from reality she had become. The systematic disarming of Leslie's team was a ritualistic stripping of their false authority. Their tactical gear, fake badges, and forged documents were meticulously cataloged as evidence. The gray polos, once symbols of their manufactured power, were now proof of their crimes. Richard's pathetic attempt to claim ignorance, "I thought my mother was working with real police," was contradicted by surveillance footage of him coordinating their criminal enterprise. The investigation revealed the staggering scope of their operation. Over 3 years, across multiple states, Leslie had used the same MO: fake uniforms, manufactured authority, emotional manipulation, to steal millions in valuables. The gray polo with HOA branding was her primary weapon, more effective than any firearm because it disarmed victims psychologically. Leslie received 8 years in federal prison for armed robbery, impersonating law enforcement, fraud, conspiracy, and running a criminal enterprise. Richard got 5 years. The other team members received shorter sentences for cooperating. The gray polos were displayed in courtrooms, then a federal training facility, as textbook examples of authority impersonation. 6 months later, Pinewood Gardens was transformed. The trials had been a profound community education. New families received orientations on verifying authority. Margaret Finch became an informal leader, sharing hard-won wisdom. The sheriff's department offered Wade a consulting position, training other communities. His SWAT shirt and tattoo, once misinterpreted by Leslie as threats, became symbols of genuine service. One morning, a neighbor's young son, seeing Wade cleaning his rifles, asked about the difference between his SWAT shirt and Leslie's gray polo. Wade explained, "This uniform represents 18 years of training, service, and accountability. The gray polo represented $30 spent at a uniform shop and the willingness to lie about authority she never earned. The difference isn't in the clothing. It's in the character of the person wearing it." Leslie Donahue thought her gray polo conferred power. Instead, it became the thread that unraveled her entire criminal empire, teaching a community and law enforcement agencies nationwide that true authority is earned, not impersonated, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones hiding in plain sight, armed with a clipboard and a $30 costume.